Now, this morning as I was walking around, I noticed a lot of the regulars gave me a funny look, and that's because they were wondering, what's Dave got afterwards? Why is he wearing a tie? Why does he look like that? I could see the look in your eyes. I know that's what you were thinking. Some of you were rude enough to say it. The polite ones just gave a certain look, and I could see it in your eyes. And don't worry, it's not my new style. I'm not going to be wearing a tie every Sunday. But the reason I'm wearing this was to show you what I used to dress like when I was a school teacher. See, when I first started doing school teaching, I was in my early 20s, and I felt more like one of the kids than I did a teacher. And so I had this, I like to think of it as imposter syndrome. I felt like I was just pretending to be a teacher, that I didn't belong at the front of the classroom. Why should anyone listen to me? Why should they call me sir? It felt just silly, like I was just acting the part. But one of the things I did to help me feel more like a teacher is I dressed like a teacher. I think this is what teachers dress like, and so I got myself a tie, and these are brilliant for a teacher because they warm you up in the middle bit, but then you can write on a chalkboard like this and still have movement. So I thought, this is a teacher outfit. I dressed like a school teacher, but I felt imposter syndrome. I felt like I was faking. Over the last couple of months, Brooke and I have been in Australia, and while we've been in Australia, I have been speaking at churches, Brooke as well, speaking about what we're doing here in Ireland. And the reason we do that while we're back in Australia, I preach and I talk about what's happening here in this church, is that the churches in Australia support us financially to be here. We are missionaries in Ireland, and they pay our wages for us to be here. And so when we go back, we're presenting at all different churches, and basically I'm saying, support us and our ministry in Ireland. And I confess, every single time I got up and said that imposter syndrome fear would come back. I would feel like a pretender getting up, because it felt like I was saying, invest in us, invest in me. I'm worthy of you investing your money in. Felt like I was a salesman almost, selling this idea of ministry in Ireland. And it always felt uncomfortable. I always felt like a bit of an imposter. Now, I'm not saying that because I want you to feel sorry for me. I'm certainly not asking you to come and reassure me or boost my self-confidence. Please don't do that. I'm stating it plainly as it is, because who am I? If any of those people knew me, they would know all my faults. If they spent a moment talking to my boys would list the faults of all the things that are wrong with me. I felt like an imposter. And perhaps this idea of imposter syndrome is a struggle that you face as well. Sometimes feeling like a bit of an imposter. Probably not in the same situation as me, not getting up in front of different churches for each week for a couple of months, but in a different way. Perhaps you feel like a bit of an imposter. Maybe it's in this context. You know that you're meant to share the gospel with others. You want to share the gospel with others because you know it's true and you know people need to hear it. But the problem is this: it feels like you're saying to others, be more like me. Come and believe what I believe. Come and do what I do. I've got it all figured out. That's what it feels like when you're sharing the gospel. Come and be like me. I've got all the answers. And so you feel like an imposter because you know you don't have it all figured out. And you know you've got issues in your own life, persistent sins and doubts and things you're struggling with. And so you think to yourself, who am I to say, come and be like me? I don't have it all figured out. I'm not perfect. I'm a sinner. My life's not perfect. There's lots of areas I'm struggling with. And my church is full of people just like me, messed up just like me. Who am I to say, be like me? Do you ever feel like that when it comes to sharing the gospel? Do you ever feel like a bit of an imposter? Well, can I suggest to you this morning that if you feel like that, then the words of John the Baptist that we're looking at today are exactly what you need to hear. And can I also say this, if you don't feel like an imposter, if you actually feel like, no, I'm quite happy to tell people, come and be like me, I do have it all sorted out, then you need to hear the words of John the Baptist even more. And so let's spend some time looking at these words from John 3. And the first thing we see is that there is a problem of a ministry that is being eclipsed. We see it in verses 25 to 26. Now, a discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification. And they came to John and they said to him, Rabbi, he who was with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing and all are going to him. John's context was one where he had a ministry of preparing the way for Jesus, and that ministry involved calling people out, calling the Jews out to be baptized, a baptism of repentance, to turn away from their sins and turn back to God. And yet, as this stage of his ministry comes, he has just baptized Jesus, and he sees people are no longer going to him, but they're going more and more to Jesus. And his disciples have this oh so human response. It is a response of, rather than being excited, feeling discouraged and feeling jealous. They feel like their ministry, the one they'd got involved in with John the Baptist, he had this big platform, he was doing really important things, and now it feels like instead of being on the ascendancy, it's on the wane, it's going down, and so they feel jealous and disappointed and discouraged. And I think that is something that every one of us faces, that we all at some stage will be eclipsed by someone else. You either have already been eclipsed, or maybe right now you're in the process of being eclipsed by someone, you're feeling it, or you will one day be eclipsed. In every area of life, there will be someone who does it better than you. There will be someone who is more successful. There will be someone who perhaps even unfairly receives more credit and praise than you do. It will happen. You will be eclipsed. But the question is, how will you respond? And today I want us to focus on two particular things from John the Baptist's response to his ministry being eclipsed. The first is this: John looks up and not sideways. John looks up and not sideways. We see it in verse 27. He says, a man can only receive what is given him from heaven. He says, this wasn't even my ministry in the first place. I look up and I see that it is God that gave me everything that I have, including my ministry. And so this reminder to look up, that a man can only receive what is given him from heaven, this reminder stops us from comparing, especially when it comes to ministry and churches and what God is doing through us in our little corner. Because we begin to see the bigger picture, that we are doing only what God has set for us to do. He's the one who's at work. And so rather than looking around at us and comparing ourselves to others, we can be thankful for what God is doing. No matter what part of our ministry that is, what part of our lives, we can be thankful and see the bigger picture as we look up, not sideways. I confess sometimes I don't do that well. Pray for me that I get better at that. But sometimes when I hear about a church that is doing really well, do you know what my first response sometimes is? And this is a horrible thing to say. I should be full of joy, shouldn't I? That's the right response. But sometimes I feel jealous. Sometimes I think, imagine that happening here. Why can't we have that in Ballina? Why can't that be happening? I compare Ballina to what's happening elsewhere sometimes. And rather than looking up and being thankful for what God's doing here, I get discouraged and jealous, and that is stupid. Comparison really is the thief of joy. So John's first response is, look up, not sideways. Stop comparing to those around you and what God's doing in their lives or what they have. Stop trying to keep up with others. Instead, look up and be thankful, because a man can only receive what is given him from heaven. This attitude makes it about what God is doing in lots of ways through lots of different people. And we get to celebrate that. because it's not about us, it's about him. We look up with joy rather than sideways with jealousy. That's the first thing from John the Baptist's response we need to hear from. And the second comes in verse 30. Verse 30 we read, he must become greater, I must become less. Or in the ESV that we read, he must increase, but I must decrease. Now the specific context of John's ministry is that his very role was one where he knew from birth that he was meant to go and have a preparing the way ministry to kind of level the paths for Jesus. He knew, and we were told from before he was even born, that he was leaping for joy within his mother's womb when he came into the presence of Jesus being in Mary's womb next to him. He knew that his very role, his very life, was to prepare the way for Jesus. And so it makes sense for John to say that he must increase and I must decrease, because that's what his ministry was about. More of Jesus, less of me, says John. So it makes sense in his ministry. But I want to suggest to you it is not just tied to the specific context of John's ministry, that it is something we need to hear and learn from. Less of me, more of Jesus. That's not just for John. Less of me, more of Jesus needs to be what we look to in the year ahead. As we begin this new ministry year, I want these words echoing in your head. Less of me, more of Jesus. Say it in your head right now. Less of me, more of Jesus. See, here we have this remarkable response that sets the example of humility that we need to follow. True humility, we see it in John, is not about self-loathing or putting yourself down. It's not thinking less of yourself. It's simply thinking about yourself less and thinking more and more about Jesus. You don't need to walk around going, I hate myself and I'm terrible. That's not what true humility is. True humility is to say, I'm going to put all my thoughts not on my own reputation and what people think of me. I'm instead going to focus on Jesus. That's what true humility is. Not putting yourself down. It's about exalting God's anointed king. And we saw that same sort of humility in the story of Jonathan and David that Brooke told for us for the kids, right? That attitude was, Jonathan loved David more than himself, like himself. It was this idea of such a love. And it's not just, the video made it about friendship, but what's actually going on there is bigger than friendship. It's a battle for a throne. And Jonathan's saying, I don't want the throne. The throne's not mine. The world might think it's mine because I'm the son of the king, but that throne belongs to God's anointed one. David is God's anointed one. And so Jonathan is very clear in saying, everyone else thinks I'm going to fight for that throne. Instead, I'm going to put David on that throne. And in that little story from the Old Testament, there is this echo that rings forward to John and Jesus' time and to our time. Because we face a battle in our lives for who will be on the throne. Who will be on the throne in your life? Only one person can sit on that throne in your life. And this world shouts at you, get on the throne. It's you. You can be king of your life. You can make your life all about what you want. Pursue your dreams. Pursue your desires. Don't worry what anyone else says, because you are the star and you play the starring role. It is all about you. That's what this world says, and this battle within our hearts says, yes, I want to get on that throne. I want to be in charge. I want it to be all about me. But in that context, John the Baptist says, no, he must increase and I must decrease. Less of me, more of him. Isn't that radical? In this world that says you, we say no, him. Jesus. Jesus is the one. And so again, true humility, not self-loathing, not putting yourself down, exalting God's anointed king, more of Jesus, less of me. Now, even if we say, yes, let's make more of Jesus. I like Jesus, he's awesome. And so this is not a controversial teaching in our church. Let's be a church that talks about Jesus lots. That sounds like a good idea. Even if we say that, there's a danger that we will get it wrong by remaking Jesus to fit with our world, our priorities, our values. Instead of the real Jesus of the Bible, we end up with a Jesus who never confronts our sin, who never disagrees with us, who never demands anything of us. He never demands we lay down our lives. He's the kind of Jesus that just says, I'm cool with you being you. And we just cruise along and we think, yeah, more of Jesus. But we never listen to the real Jesus. We've got a little plastic Jesus we get out of our pocket and we use him to feel good about ourselves and to feel comfortable and like we're doing the right thing. Look at me, more of Jesus. And then we put him back away and we don't listen to him. That's not the true Jesus. Jesus who fits in our pocket for good luck and good conscience. No, that's not the real Jesus. And so the temptation then sometimes is we think of Jesus as a teacher, as an example, as an inspiration. He's all of those things, but that's not enough. Jesus can't just be the one we say, yeah, more of Jesus. He inspires me and encourages me. That's not enough. Jesus is Lord. He is King. He alone sits on that throne because he alone deserves it. He's the only one. He is God in flesh. And he is our Saviour. If Jesus was just a teacher, all he would do would give us a teaching that is beyond us and we are unable to live up to it. And so it would just be a burden on us in the end. But instead we have Jesus as the one who is our only hope in life and death because he is our Saviour. And so he belongs on the throne because he purchases us and redeems us. And the good thing is that he doesn't hoard that glory for himself and look down on us from afar and say, yes, I am on the throne and you stay down there. He stoops to us and draws us near to him. This Jesus who says, I alone on the throne, invites us to sit with him and worship him and share in his glory. It belongs to him and him alone, and yet we get to share in it. Because Jesus is loving and good. More of him, less of me. And so how do we apply that here in Ballina? Well, can I say this? Is the year ahead of us, if we think about all that God might do, can I suggest that mantra of less of me, more of Jesus rings out from us in all our decision making? And one particular area might be this. Maybe as you think about what God might do in this church, you have all these ideas that are about the church. And you think, if only we did this more, if we did better this or better that, maybe you can picture the things that would make the experience of coming on a Sunday a better experience. And maybe even in your conversations with people, when you're thinking about inviting them along, you want to talk about church and the people and how friendly it is and the coffee and the preacher even wears a tie sometimes. And the casual, you'll love it. It's casual and it's relaxed. And and there's this. And we think of all these things. We want to sell this product about why they should come to our church. I love that those things are important to you, but don't ever let them become the most important thing. Let's try this year to not talk so much about church and to talk more about Jesus. That's hard to do. It's much easier to say, you should come along, you'll love it, and then list all these things you think they might love. Talk about that stuff if you must. But first, let's talk about you'd love Jesus. Jesus is amazing. Jesus is my hope. Let me tell you about what my life would be like without Jesus. I'd have no hope in life or death. Let me talk about the difference Jesus has made. He alone has saved me, and I love him, and he loves me. Can we try and talk about Jesus more? Less of us and more of him? And can I say, with that idea of the imposter syndrome, this is the perfect tonic. Because you're not going out there saying, be more like me. And you're not going out there and saying, I have all the answers. And you're definitely not going out there and saying, come along to church because David and John have all the answers. No, we do not. You don't need to say or pretend anything. Because what you're saying is, I was lost, but now I'm found. I am without hope, but Jesus is all my hope. And so as we go out into this world, you don't need to have it all sorted out and be perfect before you talk to others about Jesus. Because he is the one we point to. Less of me, more of him.